for landline, voice, and data services. We've covered a lot of cellular activity in the previous presentations. So I'll be recording this session as well and making it available on YouTube, on our web channel on YouTube. Let's see here. So we're going to quickly go through some of the things that are common regardless of whether you're working on a landline account or a cellular account. It's so quick that it doesn't hurt to see it a couple of times. So add a client, add a location, add a supplier, and import some inventory, some phone numbers. So those are very common regardless of what activity, whether it's what client or what services you're dealing with. So it's such a simple thing. We'll run through those. When we get down to adding the supplier plans, then it's going to we're going to drill into the various service type definitions that are not just in the industry but mirrored in TAMS. And then we're going to establish a sample account that has elements of voice, local toll, long distance, toll-free, ancillary features, data circuits, and establish the baselining. And then we'll probably have some time to touch on the optimization of those services. Certainly I want to cover how we handle deleting services or lines. That's, again, common between landline and cellular, so if you've done it for cellular, you already know how to do it for the landline. And we will then go through adding billing cycles from a carrier and importing the call data usage and being able to do the analysis on those on that information. Of course, that's where the rubber meets the road in terms of reducing costs and then invoicing for savings. That's a lot to do in an hour and a half, but we're going to jump into it, and I may jump from our demo client that we're going to start from ground zero, and once we demonstrate a few examples of creating plans and adding them, I may then skip to that same client in a completed fashion, as long as you're comfortable with the mechanics of how to make that happen and the processes that are involved. I mean, really, once you get the big picture, it's just a matter of practice to get the mechanics of it down. So without any further introduction, are there any questions or comments before I get started? Okay. Then what I have is I'm going to start with adding a new client, and this client is very simple to add a client. When you open TAMS, you're on the client details. Search for a client name, which is like under search clients from the full menu, brings you to this form. You just click new. It opens up the form, and in order to save some time so that we don't have to type, what I'm going to do is open up a contact from my Outlook contacts, and I'll demonstrate this. So here I have my Outlook, and I have a company called Landline Savings Company. Tiger Woods is the manager of this company, and I just take that contact and drag it over here and drop it onto TAMS, and it populates the information with the company name and address. It looks like I don't have a couple of the fields set, the United States or the department number here, but it's a quick and easy way of getting information into a client contact. And when I click Save, it creates that client record. It says down here, client data saved, and it also creates a main location. Every client will automatically have to have at least one location, just like every account has to have at least one sub-account. So those are created automatically, but again, any number of locations can exist for any client. This example client has 2 locations. I'm only going to work with one right now. We can move lines at any point in the stage from one location to another by dragging and reassigning them, selecting them and reassigning them and saying, oh, they belong to a different location, but this will serve our purposes for this demonstration. If we're adding locations, we can also drag 100 contact cards over at once and add all 100 at a time. So if you have a client that can provide you with a site contact for each location, then you would be able to get those Outlook contacts and drag and drop them directly into TAMS and populate all 100 at a time. Okay, so we have basically that's all you need to know to add a client or a location. Is defaulted. If you want to add more locations, you just click Add Location from the button where we're on the Locations tab. Or you can be on a location where we're on the Location Details form and then say New Location. And you can delete them and whatnot. So, you know, just like any other standard tool. Okay, so this particular client, for this demonstration, we're going to start with an account that is a Windstream account. And this Windstream account actually used to be Paytech, as many of you know. So I'm going back to an older invoice back in 2011 for this particular example. This account, as I mentioned, does have, it has 2 PRIs. Just to give you a quick summary of it, it has 2 PRIs. One of the PRIs has 11 voice channels that are bonded to the first PRI, and then it has a 768 kilobit per second internet service on the second half of the second PRI. So you'll see that with our call detail, we also ran a traffic study. So, you know, obviously some other information can be supportive of the analysis capabilities of TAMS, but we easily determined that their high watermark, that they were nowhere near using one full PRI, and that they also had Comcast internet service as their primary internet service, and they didn't need the second PRI for what it was costing them. So as we get down to the details of the data, you'll see that part of the optimization of this client was to eliminate the second PRI. We also put in SIP trunking and converted a whole bunch of remote call forwards into virtual telephone numbers and brought those in as SIP trunks. So we took those costs from $30 a month each down to $1 a piece per month each. And there was about 50 of those remote call forward circuits. We lowered their local costs. We lowered their long distance costs. We lowered their internet costs. We cut their costs more than 50%. So I think this is an example that will serve our needs well. So, you know, this is standard invoice. Of course, we have all different invoices from different carriers. From Paytech's perspective, what we do with this bill is we can copy. This is not a scanned bill. This is downloaded from the internet. So we can copy and paste text out of this PDF. And as some of you know, we have converters that can read directly from a PDF file, and we have other converters that need an intermediate step of being copied and pasted to a TXT file, which takes all of about 10 seconds to do a Control-A and a Control-C, and for it to copy everything, and then a Control-V to paste it into a TXT file, which I did before this session. So we have that, you know, initial manual step already taken care of. But what we want to do is we want to extract the inventory of the lines that are on this account, and we want to be able to import them. We don't want to sit down and type in all this information. So we revert to our scripting capabilities. We have a script specifically for Paytech, and we have a couple of different options from our on our Paytech scripts. And the one command is to extract the phone number.
How do you know which script it is?
Okay, so first part of that comes from experience, and part of it comes from its support. If you have an invoice or a carrier that you're not sure if we have a script that's supportive of it or not, we probably do. But we also have on our members-only website all of the scripts, and they some of them have what's called a -H option, which is to help document the elements of the script. And honestly, experiences, there's no substitute for that, because even AT&T has they have about a handful of different billing platforms, and there's different scripts for different platforms, even for the same carrier. So it's something that there's no simple answer to that, but it's not as bad as it may appear to be, because we name the scripts according to the carrier names, and that does help narrow the field significantly.
Yeah, so that would be probably most of us on the call, and I think this is really important for me is to figure out the scripts. You mentioned on the website there's support for this. Can you show us or email that later where that website is so we can find that and kind of work through, build that experience of finding the right script and which to grab?
Okay, and who is asking for that?
Yeah, Dan Aylward.
Hi, Dan. Sure. And you should have your access to those, so I'll follow up with you afterwards. We have a members-only site. You must be a licensed TAM user to access that site. So since you're leasing it and you're licensed, then no problem. The source code, of course, is proprietary. It's not allowed to be redistributed. But you know, the scripts are available to you. So
Thank you.
It's no problem. Okay, and of course for you already have the shortcuts, just like I have here, a shortcut. In the hosted environment, there's a folder that lists all of the scripts. And some of the scripts, as I mentioned, have a -H option. That's something that we've been incorporating every time we touch a script now to make them self-documenting. And so it'll tell you about itself. Sometimes we are provided copies of invoices, and we create scripts for those end users so that it takes out the information and formats it into an importable format, which is just a common delimited file. We're a very open architecture. But we're not provided the details as to how they got that information to start with. So we can't document how to get that from a particular supplier if it's an uncommon CLEC or something. So we can only document the information that we're provided by our user community. Okay, so the scripts are, once you know a script for a given account or provider, then it's going to be the same script month after month after month, and really the only thing that you need to know is how to run them. And it's a very simple input format. It's an input file name, which I have as a text file, which is what is required. It says TXT from PDF file, so a little bit of a guidance at least on this input screen. What the name of the output file is that's going to be created is, and then these options, and the options are all documented. And this is standard regardless of the carrier or with the client, it's the same. So it's a factory style approach. So we take and I'm going to take that command. I usually have these commands commented into the client notes, and I copy and paste that command into the little input box, and it runs. It already ran on my other screen. I drag over here so you can see that it extracted 39 phone numbers. Now notice some phone numbers are going to be toll-free numbers, and we're going to talk about how those are handled. They're different because toll-free numbers aren't actually lines of service. They're services on lines of service. So we treat those as a service, not as a separate line. And that basically the line that they go to is the Route 2 number, and you can have more than one of those toll-free numbers routing to the same Route 2 number. We can also extract the call detail, which we can do right now. It again you're not going to learn anything here. It's just a copy and paste of a command or typing of a command into a input box, and we can run this script. It gives some summary status along the way, showing the numbers that it's processing. It says processing a phone number, and then it provides some summary totals for each phone number. It shows the number of calls, number of minutes, and the cost accumulated for that phone number. And as it works its way through the bill at the very bottom, it gives a sub-account total, and then it gives a grand total. So these are nothing for you necessarily to do anything with, but it's a sanity checkpoint. You don't want to get all the way to the end and then figure out that there's a problem and try to have to backtrack and figure out where the issue could be. So those scripts always provide an opportunity for the person running it to just put their eyeballs on it, and you can compare it to make a sanity check by comparing it to the PDF. And you can look and see, well, do the usage charges add up? Do the number of calls and things like that, do they match my expectations? So that might be the first indicator that perhaps there's been a change to a billing format and the script might need to be updated. Typically, a lot of our scripts, they don't get touched for months and months or years. So others, some companies tend to be a little more dynamic in their, I guess their programmers in their billing department need to come in and do something every day. But it's not too bad. And of course, since we centralize the maintenance of it and host it on the server, as soon as, you know, a change or a maintenance is required, then that flows out to everybody.
Chris, when that occurs, do you save the old script in case we have old invoices that we need to process?
We almost always make the updates backward compatible.
Okay.
So they'll work with new or old versions of the script. This script works on one back in 2011.
Okay.
Even though it changed from Paytech to Windstream since then. So, okay. So I think that's enough about running scripts. I mean, it's not complicated. And one of the things that we do is we want to document those. I put them right in my into this client account so that it's documented right where I need it, when I need it. And the same is true for my client. So for my staff. So that whoever's working a client, all the information's at their fingertips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back up using this little navigation from picking this Windows. I can also just close. I could go back to the client details here or just close this form, and it will revert me back to the previous form. And under service accounts, I need to add an account. And so I think I've chosen a different account number rather than the real account number. So I'm just going to go with that account number that I've dummied up here, and we're going to say add account. And the first thing we need to do is select what supplier it is. Well, notice we don't have Windstream set up in this demo database. So, and this is true, you might find new carriers that we don't have, and we're not trying to maintain, you know, it would be an impossible task to try to maintain a list of all the suppliers and all their plans and as they change every day. We're only interested in the ones we need to worry about. So we add a new supplier right here. We can also do it from the suppliers menu and add just like we add a new client, but this is the quickest approach, is to add a new supplier. Come in here and type in, I'm going to type in Windstream. And that's all I need is a name for now, and I can save it. And when I close this, I can come back and now Windstream's available for me to select. So very simple. I'm putting in this dummy account number, and I'm going to say Landline account for a demo. So I give it a supplier name, an account name. Notice the form details gives you some information when you enter a field. It updates and says this is a required field for the account number. This is informational or preferred to have some information in here. And again, you can drag and drop a contact information for the account rep. There's information in here about the contract end dates. You can set reminders for contract end dates. Keep track of when you request for CSRs or send a letter of authorization, order a traffic study. Lots of logistical and CRM capabilities here, but the essence of the analysis, all we need is to get a supplier, an account number, and preferably some sort of title on there. Now, I mentioned that we can also support multiple sub-accounts. Now, this particular account does have 2 sub-accounts. And when we import our phone numbers, you'll see that they also get imported according to these sub-account numbers. So we have to manually add the sub-accounts, but it's a very simple thing to do. You notice, again, a main sub-account was created automatically when we created the account, just like it automatically created the first location for a client. So I'm going to take this this one account number, and I'm just going to change the group ID to what they have. And I could change the description of it as well. But we can edit those sub-accounts, or we can also add a new sub-account, take the second number that is here, and you can do this, again, as many times as necessary, depending on the complexity. This is not a TAMS thing. This is the billing structure of the suppliers that you're working with. So you can mirror exactly what the suppliers have. And you want it that way, so you have a one-to-one relationship so that when you're looking at something in TAMS, it matches what you're seeing on a bill. But one bill versus another bill, they could have different structures. So we have this capability to create multiple sub-accounts, and each sub-account can have billing parameters that are associated with the sub-account. Now, these do not pertain to any individual line. But there are account level or sub-account level parameters such as what are your volume discounts for local or in-state long distance, or we can also have discounts on ancillary services, and we'll discuss what those are. Interstate discounts and international discounts could be different percentages. There can also be a percentage discount on the planned monthly recurring cost, which is different than your usage. So these down here are related to usage discounts. Up here, these are monthly recurring cost discounts. Those come in real handy if you're doing, let's say, an AVPN data network for AT&T. You can put in the base cost on the plan and then establish what their percentage discount is. And then if you renegotiate a new contract and you just get a different discount, all you have to do is come in and add a change record on a given effective date and put the new discount percentage. So these billing parameters also can have changes associated with them at different periods of time. So I don't want to spend too much time on the details of each of these. Right now we're just getting the larger elements in place, and then later we can refine some of these individual fields and speak more directly to what those fields are, what their benefit is. So you can see that creating an account, if we go through the syllabus here, adding a client, adding a location, adding a supplier account or a supplier, and the sub-accounts is very simple. We'll want to move on to importing our inventory. So I already demonstrated running a script from an invoice or a CSR to extract inventory. And inventory is simply phone numbers and data about those phone numbers, but not plan information. So TAMS' design, it allows for plans to be separate but related to phone numbers with different records that have effective dates. So you can have different plans at different dates. So the phone number records stay the same, but the plans that are associated to them change, from a baseline to an optimized configuration. So we start with this idea of these static phone numbers, and we have to import them to a location because those landlines are always tied to a physical location. So we can navigate out of here. I noticed that we have links available. This version, I think, may be a little bit ahead of what's hosted. We're working on the next version, and we, alpha and beta test it internally before we release it. For now, I think it's best if you just navigate back to the client details and go to the Locations tab and double-click to drill down on a given location. We're adding more and more hot links so that you can more easily navigate from one form to another. There's only about a handful of forms that you really touch in TAMS during any given session, but 5 or 6 forms, until you're familiar with it, you can get a little bit lost. We do have in our help files a navigation form that a lot of people find useful, that under the contents, under getting started, there's this form navigation, and it shows the menu system and the tree structure of the form. So the one that we're working on now is we've picked a client, we're on the location details, and we're going to come down to the line details. And it's a logical, hierarchical structure. You have a corporation, lots of different locations. Each location has a bunch of lines. So we're going to go to the location lines, and we're going to add some lines. When we go to add the lines, it puts us into what's called manual add mode, so we could just start typing in phone numbers, but I never type phone numbers. I'm not a very good typist. So we are going to stop adding. It tells you to exit the add mode. You click the stop adding, and then the import line records will be activated. So you may have remembered from our previous conversation that we can establish a root folder for a given client so that you can quickly navigate to a folder that has the information in it that you're interested in. I'm just copy and pasting this for this benefit, so that when we come in here and say import line, it takes us straight to the folder for this given client. Actually, I put the wrong one in there, so hang on a second. And by the way, while updating this information, I would like to mention to Cindy that I believe the Dropbox capability will work. I have been thinking about this, and we should be able to put the script shortcuts right into your Dropbox folders and be able to run the script shortcut from a Dropbox folder.
Okay, that's great.
Is that something you've tried?
I haven't tried that, no.
Okay, I think it'll work. So
Okay.
if you want to give it a try, then we can let. Did someone else try it?
Well, no, I just said that seems a lot easier than moving those things or having multiple locations for files.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the hosted environment is intended to be the Dropbox, you know, to store all your client data and all that. But if you already have this other Dropbox environment set up, we talked to our hosting partners about installing Dropbox and making it, you know, accessible directly from, you know, from their hosted drives, from their hosted server, and there was an issue with that. So I think it was a security issue. We asked the question, and they said no, they would not or could not do that. But what I would do, Cindy, is maybe since you can get to your local C drive from the G drive on the hosted environment, is just at the top of your C drive, put a shortcut to your Dropbox, and then try opening it, and you could drag one of those shortcuts for the scripts into it, and then try to run it.
Okay.
So what we have is the ability to jump right to a local folder designated for this client. And remember, we ran the script to pull out the phone numbers, so I'm going to just select that, and notice it's going to give me a warning about it's validating the LADA of every phone number that it's importing. TAMS has the entire North American dialing plan built in as an internal database. We actually have a tool so that you can query it. But when it sees a toll-free number, it cannot add those numbers as physical lines because there's no LADA affiliated with them. So I've got some warnings about the toll-free numbers, and that's fine. That's intended to make sure that TAMS wants to know the LADA and state of every phone number that is entered, so that when it sees calls to other phone numbers or coming in toll-free from other destinations, it can determine, is that an in-LADA call, is it an inter-LADA in-state call, is it an interstate call, or is it an international call? So, and those as we know, those calls can have different price points, different usage patterns, and the ability to analyze those details is where a lot of the savings can be derived from. So the toll-free numbers are... Go ahead.
This Paul, just a quick question. I know you've told me this before, but what those R numbers, so when it has like 906, R01, how do we treat those again if those are imported in like this?
Yeah, so the you can also have for digital circuits, and I'm going to show how to add, let's say, an internet circuit that is a cable service, or it's a digital dedicated long distance trunk that doesn't have a telephone number, a TN associated to it. So what we do in those cases is we can add a line manually. You can import them too, as long as they adhere to the set of rules, and the rules are documented in the help. So all you have to do is hit F1, and it will tell you. But you need a valid NPA and NXX. So I'm going to create one that's 412677, and I'm going to call it INET. So that's an internet circuit. That internet circuit is it's a T1. It has a circuit ID associated with it. I'm just going to copy and paste what I have over here. And I'm going to put a description that it's 11 voice lines and 768K. Actually, it's a PRI T1, where 11 of the lines are bonded to another PRI and 768K internet. So I can add that, and adds in just like a regular phone number. Now, the benefit of this is that TAMS knows from the 412677 that the LADA, and we have a little tool here that is just a useful reference, that it shows the LADA number and the state and the country that North American dialing plan phone number it resides in. So any calls that come in on that 11 voice channels, if necessary, it knows that LADA and state. Now, you're not going to get phone numbers billed to this phone number. Did that answer your question, Paul?
I guess so. We do the same thing with R01 or R41 or those.
Now, are they phone numbers or account numbers? Because they're two different things.
Well, within an account, sometimes it's the account number. Sometimes it's one of the accounts on there might. Well, I guess always that's an account number.
Right.
But it also.
So that's the difference.
So PRI. That's
right. So we have clients that would have a PRI with Windstream, and it's like 612E09 blah blah blah, and that's an account number, and the account numbers have no restrictions on them. And then there's billing telephone numbers. Usually there's a primary main number that'll be the billing telephone number, and that's a real phone number, and then there'll be a whole bunch of DIDs. So I want to discuss that, so we imported all this inventory, and again, it didn't matter whether there was, one line or 100 lines or 1,000 lines. We can import it through the scripting or manually typing in, onesie twosie type scenarios. But we've imported the CSV files, and we're going to get into adding the supplier plans next. But yeah, the supplier accounts and the lines and the plans are three separate entities. And just to give that high-level review of the TAMS architecture, we have this concept of this three-way Trinity relationship where we put lines and have them bill on sub-accounts with certain service plans. So it's these three components. And we put it, when we're creating these lines, we're not tying ourselves to a carrier. We're not tying ourselves to a plan or to a billing account. They're just phone numbers. They don't have anything to do with billing until we create these relationships of what plans are on those lines. And, lines have these different core plans and ancillary plans. So that's what we're going to go into next. We've already established the client with a bunch of one or more locations with as many lines per location as you need. We've created the service accounts from the supplier. We added the supplier called Windstream. We added the service account and put in two sub-accounts. So really this is the last piece, and this is the most challenging. I mean, we've been talking now for half an hour, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 7 bubbles satisfied. Of course, it could have been done in about 5 minutes worth of time, but the plans are where most of the time needs to be spent, understanding what's in the bill. And this is the one thing that is not automated in TAMS. Well, if we could figure out how to automate it, we would. But sometimes these plans are defined through looking at the bills and looking at their rates. Sometimes it's through looking at CSRs. And I can't train how to read all the bills in the world, but what we have is a way of modeling and capturing that information so that you have an accurate representation of the costs, and then be able to analyze what's driving their costs and where are their cost savings opportunities. And then when you do make changes, how to bill accurately for the savings that were delivered, and to know when to start billing for those savings and when to stop billing for those savings. So, it's got, of course, we talked about how it can support project services. Even I refer to this information that we have for project services like upgrading phone systems and, other projects. So it can be useful for managed services, project services, or contingency cost savings, or invoice processing. So let's move over to the client, and what I'm going to do is take you from the top level menu over to, there's a lot of ways to get there, but we're going to go to the suppliers, and we're going to go to WinStream. So we created this WinStream record, and it's just a company. Of course, we could have added all kinds of information about what their help desk or, you know, their customer service phone number is, what their repair phone number is, what their website is. Those are informational details we won't concern ourselves with. But there's a tab called Supplier Plans, excuse me. And the Supplier Plans is where we are going to define the various services that are on the account. And I'm going to refresh your memory here of our syllabus. So we're going to start with the local plan first, and then we'll go into the long distance and local toll and toll free. So I think the most relevant one to start with is this PRI. Obviously, we can do POTS lines and all kinds of plans and put them on different lines. I'm going to start with the PRI. And we actually are going to have two of them. This one, if you details, ignore the man behind the curtain. So we start with adding a plan, and we want to give it a plan name. And so that plan name, I'm going to give it local. I always name my plans per client. You don't need to. You could reuse the same plan across as many clients as you want. But if you have a change in taxes or something, or a change in a plan that you want to only restrict to impacting one client, I recommend coming up with some boundaries for your plan so that they don't cross over and couple the clients to each other too much. Actually, we don't do it at all. So I created an acronym called LLS for Local Landline Services, or Landline Savings Company, I think is the name of the client here. So this is a baseline plan, and we can select what type of plan it is, and we're going to say, oh, this is a local plan. So a local plan is your local dial tone. POTS lines, PRI, T1s that provide the phone numbers and the local dial tone. They can have with them certain charges for, let's say, federal subscriber line charges is what they're called here. On a PRI, they're $6.35 a piece. It turns out to be $31.75. We have a field for the local surcharges, which are common to many carriers, not all carriers, so you can populate these here, or you can choose to keep those as separate ancillary features, and we'll show ancillary features here shortly. I'm going to not walk down through this bill because reading a bill and populating a field is not really that useful when it comes to knowing how to use the tool. I'm just going to type in some numbers that I have here that we've already derived from this. It also, we know from the contract and from the billing that their usage is billing. It's actually 1.5 cents per minute for local calls. So we have the ability to put in per call charges or per minute charges. If you have a situation where the first minute costs costs a certain amount, maybe I'll just pick a simple number like 25 cents, and then it's 10 cents per minute thereafter, then you would put in the 10 cents per minute and then 15 cents per call as like a connection charge. So we can model billing increments that are 3-minute blocks or 1-minute blocks, or 6-second increments, 1-minute minimums, 30-second minimums, 18-second minimums. And those are also important when it comes to calculating cost savings. So being attentive to the field details is important to accurately billing for savings. They don't have different rates for different zones in this particular plan for this provider, but we can support up to 6 local metro zones, which some carriers you need to have, others it's irrelevant. So in this case, when we populate the first zone, it populates all the others all the way down. And we have chosen to take the this charge here, and I want to make sure that I am looking at the right service description. Local, PRI, Bethel Park, $475. Okay, so this one's $475, like you see on the bill, for the monthly fee. There are some other local fees that are on the bill, and again, you'll notice those down here. Like, well, we have a field for local number portability. These regulatory assessment surcharges is $1.23. So we have $1.23, and this local fees is a catch-all for things that don't fit neatly into the monthly recurring. And, you know, if you look at a bill from California, there's 22 different surcharges and things on there. And if they're a fixed monthly fee, you can just include them up here, aggregate them. What we would do is put the notes, what they are, like we could say here, regulatory assessment charge, local fees. But we don't need to have a field for every possible, you know, municipal surcharge that is thought of. Although if you want to take it to that level, you can do that with ancillaries. But what we would do, I'm trying to give you some kind of best practice along the way, and you can include more than one thing here and just aggregate them into this local fees field. Now, also, I know that in Pennsylvania, there's a 3% federal excise tax, a 6% state tax, a 5% gross receipts tax, and a 1% Allegheny County tax for this particular client in this particular jurisdiction. The directory assistance is $1.99. Again, you can see that from either a contract or from the usage data, and we can save that plan. Now, that plan is available to be put onto a one of the phone numbers. That's the billing telephone number for that PRI. Okay. That's a local plan, and I want to run through some of the other service types. So let me back up and revert to the call detail records that we had scripted from the bill. And because we have these call detail records that can be imported for each billing cycle, we can use those call detail records to also analyze them before they've even been brought into TAMS with this tool called Determine Calling Rates from CDR records. So what we want to do there is we want to take a look at what are the rates that are being billed on this account for their local toll and long distance and toll-free. Now, I mentioned the toll-free numbers did not import, and that's because they have not been affiliated to a Route 2 number. And once we assign them to a Route 2 number, then we will know the state and the LATA that they're in, and all the call records will be able to determine if they're in LATA or out of LATA. So I'm going to browse to the DNs, no, I'm sorry, to the call detail records, and I'm going to open and I'm going to calculate that file. Now that file has thousands of call records in it, and what it does is it takes them by service type as local service, and you'll notice that and I can group this by service type, and I can take all the local calls, and I can see that hey, it matches my rate of $0.015 per minute for local calling. So this, but they aggregate all of their records for local calling into a single record. So you cannot get a statistical correlation coefficient, but it can look at the duration and the cost and calculate the per minute rate and tell us what the per minute rate is for each of these different numbers that are in this file. Notice these are all the different MPA and XXs that are within this file that we ran the script on. So they're all the same cost per minute for local service. But local toll has a lot of detailed call records, and particularly most of them are on this one area code, MPA and XX of 412677. And you can see that they have a per minute rate of 0.0303. It takes out the 4 decimal places. And, you know, there's incremental rounding on calls to the nearest penny or the next higher penny. And so the actual cost is more of a stair-step function because of the cost rounding. So when you set a straight line curve and look at the slope of that curve, you're going to get some small variation, but a 98 or 99% correlation coefficient is excellent. So for local toll, we know that they're basically charging 3 cents per minute, and that we are going to, we're going to create a plan with that 3 cents per minute. Now, if we have a contract in our hand, we can look at that contract to see, are they supposed to be paying 3 cents a minute? And if not, you know, then we're going to know right away that there's a non-compliance with the billing versus the contracted rate. The interstate rate also comes in at very close to 3 cents per minute. And we are going to create a plan for that, but this helps us understand what the different rates are for international. We treat Hawaii as a foreign country. That's not a political statement or anything. It's just that the design allows us to have one interstate rate so that all interstate calls, you don't have to put 50 rates in for different states. But some carriers have different rates to Hawaii and Alaska. It doesn't have to be a different rate, but we allow for it to be a different rate. So that's why it's treated as a pseudo foreign country, only from a the ability to have rate flexibility. If you were to have a carrier that had different interstate rates to each of the 50 states, we would have difficulty in modeling that. And I don't believe I've ever heard of a company that has a different interstate rate on a state-by-state basis. And then there's the inter-LATA, which is your in-state but out-of-LATA calls. And again, those rates are derived through this linear regression tool. And the directory assistance for local is isolated and called out at $1.99. That's how I knew to put this $1.99 in here. Okay, so this tool is helpful once you run a script to get some CDR to determine what the actual rates are that are being billed. You can also just put the rates in from a contract, so it can come from both sources. Hopefully they line up with each other. And there's a lot of documentation about some of the variations of that tool. But what we want to do is we want to create a local toll plan, and we want to create a long distance plan, and we want to add that plan to the right devices. So under we're going to go ahead and start a new plan, but I'm going to clone the plan just to kind of inherit some of the tax structures and names. So I'm going to say clone a plan, and it's still the same company, LLS, but it's local toll. And we're going to define it as a local toll type of plan. It does not have $475 monthly recurring fee for local toll, and it does not have any local fees associated with it. Notice that the lower half of this screen changes to the specific billing parameters for that service type. Now, local toll actually does not get federal excise tax, but it still gets state and gross receipts tax. They do not have local tax on this particular service. And the rates that are that were appropriate for this account at that time for local toll was 0.029 was the effective rate, and this is where it's tricky with Paytech. They do also charge $1.99 for regional directory assistance, where you dial your area code 555-1212. That's different than 411. But they round every call to the next higher penny. And that means if you have a call that's 2.1 cents, after you look at the duration and the rate, it actually bills 3 cents, which is almost a 50%, well, it is a 50% increase over another carrier who billed the same rate for the same duration call, but rounds to the nearest penny. So 2 cents versus 3 cents, 50% savings on one call, it adds up. They also do provide for 6-second minimum calls, so a tenth of a minute is their minimum billing increment. So we can model the various parameters of each carrier. Now, once you figure out a carrier all of those plans with a carrier almost universally will be the same, except, of course, AT&T, because they have so many different divisions and billing systems. But, you know, for the Paytech/Windstream carrier, you figure this out one time, and then you can clone it over and over and over. So we're going to save that plan. Now we're going to go and we're going to look at the long distance for the same PRI, and that plan we're going to do by cloning the local toll and inheriting some of its standard settings. So I'm going to clone the plan, call it LD for long distance, make it a long distance plan. The tax structures are the same. Notice it's a little bit different, but it was still 0.029, even though, you know, our tool came up with 0.03. The reason we were deceived by the linear regression into that was because of this next higher increment billing model that Paytech uses. Their National Directory Assistance is also $1.99. Their billing increments are 6 seconds all the way down. And we're going to save this. But now we need to talk about this international rate table, because long distance also defines your international carrier for that line. Now remember, you can have different carrier lines with different carriers and different plans, but on a given line, you have a PIC code and an LPIC code. So you have the LPIC code for the local toll and a PIC code for the long distance. Your long distance also specifies your international carrier. And what we need to do is, now international rates are on a country-by-country basis. So we don't have to worry about state-by-state interstate long distance, but we do need to care about country-by-country long distance. So what we do is we have this thing called an international rate table. Now, right now, there's no rate table associated with the Windstream carrier for this client. And you know, some carriers have different rate tables that can have a certain monthly recurring cost associated with them, but it would have lower discounted rates for long distance or for even toll-free coming in, let's say from Canada to the U.S. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say LLS baseline international rates. And I'm just giving it a name for now, and I'm going to save that. And I'm going to select this rate table, which is empty, to provide a placeholder for all international rates that are either outbound or inbound for this client long distance plan. Again, you can have a switched long distance plan with switched international rate table and a dedicated long distance plan with a dedicated international rate table, and you can reuse the rate tables across different taxing jurisdictions. So you could have the same rate table in South Dakota and in Pennsylvania, and you know, so a rate table is reusable, but it gets populated either manually, and before I save it, I'll show you. We could come in here and say from the U.S. to Canada, the rate is going to be 0.06 cents per minute. Okay, or we can let TAMS populate it for us when it imports the usage. And when it sees international calls, again, it can do that either by the call records being flagged from the carrier that they're international, or through the interrogation of the originating and terminating phone numbers and determining what's the destination country for an outbound long-distance call, what country code is that, and what is the rate per minute, and then automatically populating this table as you import. And then as it imports more records and sees that that table has already been populated for that country, it will validate those calls. So you can either pre-populate this with contracted rates, or you can allow it to self-populate, and then once it's populated, all additional imports will validate against those rates. So you have a mechanism of easily populating it, or you can, I'm going to delete this record here. And we can save that long distance plan. Okay, so we have long distance, we have local toll, we have local. Toll-free is kind of a combination of local toll and long distance for inbound calling. I'll do one of those very quickly.
Chris, can I ask a philosophical question? This
Go
is
ahead.
Frank. You've created different plans for each of the different service types, but it looks like they're all available to group into the same plan. Is that just a best practice, or could I have local service, local toll, and toll, long distance, etc., all in the same plan for a carrier?
No, you cannot, and it's intended to not group those. Well, wait a minute. For the same carrier, okay, you cannot have a plan that combines local, toll, and long distance.
Okay.
You can group them through a naming convention, the value plus plan or whatever, and you'll see that when you filter, you can filter by your naming convention. And so if you want to see a group of 3 plans that are all together, no problem. Okay? But the flexibility of keeping them separate is so that you are allowed to take a long-distance plan independent of its local service and move it to a different account or a different carrier. So it provides this flexibility to optimize one thing that is truly optimizable within our industry and not have to change the other things that are not being touched.
Gotcha.
So I hope that answers the question.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. It's a good question, and we had put a lot of thought into what is the right model. We know that the right model is to mirror the real world, and that way you don't have to think outside of what the carrier's doing. And we do have to define these plans because this is exactly what the carriers do for them to offer the services and to bill for them. They actually have some sort of hidden plan number next to each of these, and they've got scores of every one of these. They don't have just one local toll plan or one long distance plan. What you're concerned about is what plan do they currently have, and what are my options, and that's when you go to an account rep or whatever and get that information. And you can put those other plans in here once you establish the baseline, which is like I said, this is the most tedious part. But again, once you've done one, then cloning and populating the others, like toll-free can also have inbound calls from foreign countries. We can select the one that we've already defined for outbound, and we'll select and close that and save that. So we can have different rates. Notice they're different for the PRI toll-free than they were for the outbound long distance. So we've covered the core voice features. I'm going to do 2 more plans so that you can see what else is involved with the local with the landline services. So one of the types of plans that are not, easily, that's not one of the standard core features, might be like a DID block. So I'm going to create a new plan, and I'm going to call it a 20 DID block. And it is an ancillary feature. Now, what's an ancillary feature? Well, an ancillary is everything else. It's like the quantum state of a feature. It can have a monthly recurring cost. In this case, 20 numbers is $5.50. It can have taxes. It may have taxes, may not have taxes. That's really up to the type of service and the carrier and the jurisdiction. And it can also be a metered service. It could be a certain dollar per unit and you can specify what those units of measure are, whether it's per megabyte, per call, per minute, per message. It can be per ream of paper, whatever, per web conference minute. Anyway, per participant, right? It can have an allowance so that you pay a certain amount, but then you get the first $10 free. You have to convert your number of units and the rate per unit into a dollar allowance. We couldn't make the allowance. We wouldn't know if it's 500 minutes, 500 calls, 500 messages, or whatever. So we just translate that into a dollar allowance. And it can be shared allowance also, and that's where the sub-accounts come into play, is that anything that's in the same sub-account can share either minimum commitment levels or allowance levels, but they must be in the same sub-account. So sub-accounts are useful for managing things that share allowances or minimum usage commitments. So, and then we have these different types. For a DID block, it's just an other type of service. It doesn't really have any other relevant subtype. But what we do have is the ability to also track data services. So I'm going to create an internet service that the second PRI with this client had that was an ancillary service for 768 kilobit per second internet speed that was half of their PRI. So again, I'll just clone this. I'll call it the internet bandwidth for 768 kilobit per second. That service was, and it's on the invoice here. You can go through this invoice and find it, but it was $220 for that 768K internet service. Now, as you know, that created some good savings opportunities for us, particularly since they didn't need that second PRI at all. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this designated as a data internet subtype, and we're going to put in our 768 kilobit per second speeds. Now, this information is used in data circuit inventory reports to the IT director. So not only is it useful for cost management, but also, you know, circuit inventory for IT directors, and they can see what their speeds are and what their circuits are at every location. So the larger the clients, this type of a few fields here goes a long way. And actually, we've been told by some IT directors they don't care that we save them $100,000 a year. They really like these inventory reports that we can generate for them. And I'm thinking, well, you get both, you know, and we get paid on the savings. So we're happy to deliver the $100,000 a year in savings. So those are two types of ancillary features, and you can use ancillary features for calling name and number. You could use them for those surcharges if you want to call them out individually down here rather than incorporating them into the local fee. You could leave them zero on the local plan and make the 911 and the local number portability surcharges, make them a ancillary instead of an integral part of the local fee. We're also going to talk about how late payment charges are managed. But I'm done with the definition. I've gone through the local services, the local toll, the long distance. And when we close this form, you will see that we now have, for this supplier, for Windstream, we have two types of ancillary features. We have a toll-free, we have a local toll and a long distance plan all defined. So what do we do now that we have, you know, if we go back to our little help file and our chart about what we need to establish in order to relate certain plans to certain lines, we have fulfilled all of our prerequisites to go to this managed line services function. And this is just like the cellular. You know, the folks that have been working with TAMS and using it for the cellular and all, I hope this is all very familiar. Yes, no, maybe? Okay, so what is the mechanism by which we put this together? And is everybody still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, I didn't hear anything. I wanted to make sure I wasn't talking to dead air here. Okay, so we have the ability now to come in and add our baseline plans. And you must start with a baseline. You can't optimize something until you have a starting point. So we can move our baseline as far back as we want to. In our service account, we created our sub-accounts, and our sub-accounts defaulted to 6 months prior to today's date. And we're going to want to move those way back because we're working with 2011. So I'm going to define our sub-accounts back in January of 2011. Normally, the 6-month default is typically sufficient for most people that are starting with a new client and are wanting to put in 3 or 4 or 5 months of historical data, but you're not restricted to that 6-month default, and the defaults are set here under preferences, and we have a 6-month baseline history allowance as default. but we could change that default to a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever you want to do. So our sub-accounts are defined on 1/1/2011. So we'll just kind of work with that date as my invoice here is 4/1/2011. So we're going to say that on 1/1/2011, we could presume that there were no changes, or we could just go to 4/1/2011 and presume that there were no changes between the 1st of April of 2011 and the 15th of April of 2011. And we have to define now to TAMS, what are we setting up? Well, we're going to be setting up this WinStream supplier on this WinStream account, which could have more than one WinStream account, but right now we only have one defined, so it shows us what we have for this client. We're not allowed to put, lines and plans for this client on other clients' accounts, so it's isolated on a per-client basis in terms of we're only seeing the accounts that are defined for Landline Savings Company. And we can now see the plans that WinStream are defined. Now, if we happen to have plans that were defined for another client that was like the ABC company, and I'm going to quickly clone this plan and save it so that you can see the ABC company now has a plan defined for it. If I want to filter out and only look at the LLS plans, I can just type into this little filter box for the plans and only isolate, and that's one of the things I was alluding to earlier, was that you can create a collection of things that are through your naming conventions. If I only want to see the things for the PRI, I can use PRI in my naming convention of my plans. We usually name plans what the carriers call them if they have a plan name affiliated to it. Sometimes they don't. So what do we do? Well, we can see the line type. Now, again, I don't have a CSR, and the invoice does not tell us the line type. So sometimes additional information is useful because PRI plans are definitely going to be different than POTS line plans, which are going to be different than remote called forward plans. So if we can get additional information on the lines, and we know that these lines are all POTS, and I'm going to do a block edit by selecting a bunch of them here, typing into a field up here and clicking update. Now you can see I've edited all my lines that I have selected at once. Then I can designate those line types. I can also use the imported comments, which the script did provide for us. Obviously, the more that the script can extract from the invoice and provide to the end user, the better. But they don't show hunting sequences on the invoices that would require a CSR. So depending on our data source, we try to extract the information that's relevant. And when we come to the managed services, I can refresh this form here. I can now see the POTS lines, which ones are POTS, if that's in fact correct. I can also bring in things like comment fields or circuit IDs, cost centers, whatever other fields are on the main form. But notice that I have the sub-account number, and I have 2 sub-accounts up here. So if I want to just work with this particular sub-account, and I want to put the lines that are on that sub-account in that particular account, I can start typing the sub-account number field, and it filters out. There was only one line on that particular sub-account. Similarly, if I want to see the other sub-accounts, I can clear this, and I can start typing in this sub-account. We want to make sure that we put the right plans on the right lines and have them bill on the proper sub-account so that we will get totals that look just like this in TAMS, that we will see this sub-account was $646,475, this was $23,1771. So by us modeling what the carriers are doing, we are able to reproduce or mirror their billing, and then we can analyze it. So what I want to do, though, is rather than spend time going through every line and every plan, I just want to show you that the PRI, the main PRI that we have that has the usage and all on it is a phone number that ends in 1440. That's the main PRI that gets billed all of the usage, and we can add the local plan that bills $475, the local toll plan, the long distance plan, and the 20 block DID. The other PRI, the second one, gets this internet bandwidth, so that would be the other circuit. So we're going to bill these 4 services all at once onto the the sub-account that ends in 5658. And we're going to create those baselines. And notice it tells me 4 records were added. Now, if I now get a plus sign over on the left, and it shows me that I have 4 services attached to this line. And that line now has all the monthly recurring charges and all of the billing parameters. It just doesn't have usage for every month. So it knows everything there is to know about those services on that line for those particular services. Now, it turns out that this line also has multiple DID blocks. So the DID blocks are, I think it has, let's see, how many does it have? It had, I could look at the bill here. I think it was, well, that one had 1 DID block. Okay. If it had more than 1, ancillary features can be added more than 1 time. So I could add as many DID blocks to this line as necessary, or I could make it 100, instead of a 20-20-20, I could do a 60 block and put the aggregate price of, $16.50 if I wanted to do that. So you have the flexibility and discretion to add the costs, as you deem necessary. So if it's 320 blocks, and you want to eliminate one of the 20 blocks, then that's easy enough to do. You might say, maybe that's not something you delete, but if you have multiple occurrences of something, you can eliminate individual occurrences. Okay. When it comes to all of the other stuff like POTS lines, if we have a bunch of POTS lines, we obviously would need a different plan for POTS. So we could clone this and call it, POTS, and it may have different jurisdictions or whatever. I'm just going to put $25. Clearly, the UCL is not the same on a POTS line, and the local portability may only be 20 cents, but 911 could be the same. So we can clone a plan very rapidly. It may have the same per minute usage though for local calling. And then when we come back, because we now have POTS lines and we're filtering on only POTS lines, we can check all these and add that POTS line with perhaps the same local toll and long distance to all of those lines simultaneously. So we just added 40 history records that they now have. Oh, and of course I unfortunately left DID on there too. We could eliminate those. So I just illustrating the mechanics of this form, creating the different plans that mirror the service types that are available in the industry, and being able to put them onto the appropriate account and the appropriate sub-account. So without having to go through the full course of plans for this client, I'm going to jump over to this particular same client, same account that's already been, the baselining of the plans has been completed. And we have years worth of data in here, but I'm going to focus on this April 15th billing cycle. And I'm going to show you how we would start that billing cycle. So what we would do is once we have all the plans set up, we would, I'm going to delete this billing cycle. And I'm going to re-add it. Now notice there's a gap. I have February, March, and then it jumps to 2012, and then starts with 2013. So let's just take the 4/15 of 2011, and we'll look at the bill, and we'll see that their current charges, we're not going to look at the total because we don't care about this balance forward. That could be a payment that is in arrears. They may have already paid that from previous balance from the previous month or whatever. We're looking at these new charges here, 296418, because that's what they're billing for this particular month for the new charges. That includes their usage from last month and their monthly recurring charges for the month in advance. So we've got to make sure that we're going to reconcile the billing cycle to the proper number. If we were to try to reconcile 1 month worth of data in TAMS to the 5,813, it's not going to match. because when we add a billing cycle in TAMS, TAMS is looking at it from a what is this month's charges, and if they have a past due balance that carries forward, that's an accounts payable function. One thing we do need to reconcile to, though, is any sort of late charges that may be included in these new charges. And in fact, they do have that on this particular bill, and I'll show you how you handle those, because here's a late payment charge of $42.74 that's included in this grand total. So we put in the supplier total cost, and we select mixed mode import, which means we're going to import call detail records, and they could be, when we say mixed mode, we mean they could be local toll, they could be long distance, they could be toll free. Before I do that, I should illustrate how to add a toll free number. Let's go back to this particular phone number here that is our main number. And I'm going to add a toll-free number. You need to see how this works. It's a really simple concept. What we do is we put the toll-free service on the route to number. So when we add a toll-free plan, it prompts us for the toll-free number. And we put in the phone numbers, and there may be one or more. You have to add them one at a time. But it could be 888-677-1440 as a toll-free number. And it now adds that plan, but you'll notice it has that toll-free number associated to it. And you could add more than one, just like ancillary features like we did the DID block. We could add another toll-free number, which is the 800-677-1440. And of course, our script pulled out the toll-free numbers from the invoice. If the invoice tells us the route to number, we include that in the file. If it doesn't, then you'll have to get that from the CSR. Okay, so, and again, we can script CSRs. We don't have that many scripts for CSRs, but as long as it's in electronic format, it's scriptable. What we can't script is the linking of a toll-free plan to a phone number with a toll-free number. So this is still a manual step here, but it's a one-time step. You don't do it every month. You do it once, and you don't do anything else until it changes. Now, you can drag toll-free numbers around just to quickly demonstrate that capability. There's a lot here that you're not going to see. Just so many years of capabilities developed up over time that an hour and a half is not that much. But I can move this toll-free number to a different route to number by just dragging and dropping it. And if I do that, all of the usage, the history, and everything that was affiliated with that service goes with it. You don't lose any information when you do that. Okay? So, and we can move it back. All right. So now I'm going to import the April 15th call detail record so we know the usage, because the usage is a big part of their cost each month. And we're going to match that dollar amount, and I click this Add Update Billing Cycle. If I already had a 4/15/2011, you can't have two on the same date, so it would append more records to the existing billing cycle. If it doesn't already exist, it's going to add a new billing cycle. It says, hey, are you sure? Yep. And now it says, would you please provide the import file for that month of the call detail? And when I scripted it, I called it 4/15 TAMS, whatever. So there's the call detail from the script. And it runs, and it tells you at the bottom that there were 3,166 imported records. None of them were ignored. Ignored records are phone numbers that it doesn't recognize. It doesn't know what to do with them, so it just ignores them, and it tells you there would be an exception report that would come up if we didn't have if we had call detail records for numbers that were not on this account. Invalid numbers are numbers it recognizes, and the plans are all there, but the numbers don't match. The costs are different than expected. And the valid is, of course, not only did all the plans and phone numbers that were found, but it recalculates based on the duration of the call and the plan parameters that we have set in TAMS. It calculates the expected the cost and compares it to the actual cost of the call records. And if they're off, it would be considered invalid. So every one of those matched exactly to the penny, whether they were aggregate local toll or local records, which are is information that says you had Well, those are top 10. Here's their local. Like here's one where this says 4 calls for 7 minutes for a grand total of 10 cents, 10.5 cents, and that's this record up here. And then, you know, and then as you go down through here, you'll find call detail, which is where all of these call records come from, and that's the other 3,000 records. But you see, it was fast. It happens in just a matter of seconds. It validated every one of those calls. So if you had the contracted rates in TAMS and you import the usage, even without running that tool up here, it will flag anything that's non-compliant with the rates. Okay? So if this looks great, everything matched to the penny. This is a real-world scenario, by the way. So you can see that we. Because we know next hire billing increments, if I change that plan from next hire to nearest, I'm going to get a bunch of invalid records because the costs that are expected are not going to match the actuals. Okay, so just a second here while it saves these 3,000 records to the database. And it adds this billing cycle. We can now double-click this billing cycle or use what's called manual entry mode, but I like double-clicking, and it opens up the details. And we can do some stuff. We can run an analysis report that says, hey, what's the most expensive route that this, it's an analysis of the call detail records for this 1 month of data. And it shows us that it's this local calling is where they're spending a lot of their money, but that's where a lot of their calls are too. So zone 1 local calling was $245, and I've noticed the 0000. That's because the local calling doesn't provide the local remote phone number details. But many times when you run this report, you find that needle in the haystack that is where a lot of costs are going, and it could be an international number or a local. It could be another number within their own branch or their own company, another branch. And so you can find, based on usage, just on this report, and it's sorted from highest cost to lowest cost. We can calculate our costs over on this second tab, where it takes all of the usage for every line. Notice all the toll-free numbers. They all have the number of calls and duration. You can expand the details to see how much in-state and inter-lat. Lots of interactive analysis here, but we don't spend a lot of time on that necessarily. You can group these by sub-accounts. You can see, just like the bill has these 2 totals and all, but we don't match the bill exactly. The bill was billed from the supplier at $29.64, and here it's $29.30. So what's missing is we also know, and this is something that on landlines we don't have an import or a scripting to import these late payment charges. But I can put this late payment charge as a one-time billing adjustment or as a one-time charge. It's not a monthly recurring charge. It's not a usage-based charge. And usually on landlines, a late charge is about the only $42.74. A late charge is about the only annual prorated adjustment, unless there's some sort of proration, like you added a circuit halfway through last month, and it'll have a half a month of prorated charges on there. But now when we recalculate, it turns green because we're within $9 on a $2,900 bill. So, and we could do that every month, basically by running a script, importing the usage, and without making any other changes. You don't have to define new plans and make any changes to services or anything, and just import the usage and address, we now have all of our usage imported. Obviously, there's going to be, what the difference is here in that $9 are some minor tax variations. And we don't personally go to the detail of making the taxes match to the penny. If you're doing invoice processing, however, and you want to, you can apply a billing adjustment to reconcile, and it will add an offsetting, charge, so that the $29.64.18 now matches the $29.64.18, and all it did was to put in an $8.92 billing adjustment to make those two match. And we just like we do on cellular on a line by cell phone basis. Here we don't have totals of every phone number to match to, so the only thing we can do is match the total of the bill. So, but we know that it's over in the taxes because we can verify that our MRCs and our usages are all spot on. Okay, so we're coming up on 10:30. We did go through adding the supplier plans for all of these various services, including data circuits. Baselining the managed services, we did not show optimizing. The deleting lines and services is very straightforward. It's no different than optimizing to different carriers and accounts and plans. We did show adding a billing cycle and importing usage and how to run a script, which is trivial. And then how to reconcile a billing cycle with the billing adjustments. So the final step of this would to then take this client that has several months of data, obviously we have lots of months of data on lots of clients, but is to run through and do what an analysis with how you can identify cost savings, put in alternatives for optimization, and do the analysis in advance to be able to predict what the savings would be, and then to produce that telecom analysis report with those predicted savings included, and then to produce change orders. I mean, we have lots of reports. This is something that the trial is intended for, is to let you explore the request for quotes that we have given the inventory of circuits and the usages. You can create a masked report that doesn't reveal the client name or their full phone number, just the MPA and XXs, and provide for them to quote alternative plans. Obviously, we want to identify and eliminate unused lines, be able to project what it would save to take remote call forward circuits and put them into SIP trunk virtual numbers. The change orders that could go to local providers or toll providers, or data providers, and then to produce a savings invoice on a monthly basis based on the current optimized plans versus the baselines using the current usage. And that, again, is a click of a button to produce a savings invoice. The hard work is in setting up these plans and using the managed services for the baselining. Everything else is a few clicks away. So I will cut it off at this point, but I'm happy to stay longer and go through more if people want to see more. But this is a good stopping point because you see everything that gets you to a baseline account, and it's just the analysis and TAR and savings that we could follow up with another meeting on.
Quick question again, Chris. Location. So you've talked through that a few times, and I know we're talking with Dan and I, but remind me again, or talk through best practices, I guess, for lack of a better term, on locations is not necessarily geographic location. What do you view as the best definition of a location?
Yeah, so for landlines, a location for sure should be the geographic address, so that you know the service address. And the great part about a location, so I'm on the client location details. Not only does it have this high level address and maybe a branch manager's name or whatever, and again you can drag and drop contacts into here, but there's equipment about who the interconnect is for that location. For widespread large corporations, we have many of those that they have different regional equipment. They've grown through attrition or through acquisition. Grown through attrition, that would be some trick. Grown through acquisition, and they have different types of equipment. We can document the make and model, Nortel, Northstars, and Meridians, and IP offices, or whatever they've got, and who their contact is at that location. When we want to contact this vendor, we can click their email. Again, it will open up, it integrates with Outlook. It addresses it to that individual. It shows the name that it's a request for this client at that location. Starts the body, says, Dear Jared, provides the site contact information, the hours of access, and the inventory of their circuits at that. Now, if I don't want to send them this information, I can easily just get rid of it, right? But I can say, we need to have you cross-connect on next Thursday or whatever, right? So it's a productivity tool. But the location is intended to provide the service address for each of the location lines. In the landline world, there's really no other. Now, notice, though, when you import, I imported lines to a location. And what happened was that bill that we had actually had multiple locations on it. So let me go back to this particular one. Line details. If I sort by cost center, turns out that they had one line on this bill at a different location. Okay, this was all Bridgeville, and notice I have only one location defined. So I can come back up here and say new location, call it Bridgeville, save it. If I have more information, I can add it, but if I don't have it, I don't need it. All I need is a description. Now I can take this, all of these Bridgeville lines. I'm going to sort by cost center here, and I can move them regardless of where I imported them to. And what I've done, I could have added plans, added usages, 3 years of billing cycles or whatever. I can just reassign this location over to Bridgeville, and now, even though I imported them all into one location, I now only have that one remaining line at this location and all the others over at my Bridgeville location. So a single account can span multiple physical locations, and they can have different sub-accounts from the billing of that carrier. And so with a few nuts and bolts that aren't that many, we have like 3 things to keep track of. You have a location that has physical lines. You have an account from a provider that has one or more sub-accounts. And then you have the plans from those carriers. So we can mix and match those at our discretion, and we can define a configuration right now, and then we can change some or all of those to other carriers or other plans, or other accounts or sub-accounts later. One of the things that you might do for a client is just clean up their billing and find out, well, they've got New York phones billing on the Pennsylvania sub-account, and they don't want their accounts payable department would be happy to have you fix that so that their budgets and their cost accounting is accurate versus the nightmare that you can find when you walk in and pick up an account, particularly the larger ones with AT&T, right, Cindy?
Yep. That's right.
So it may be that sometimes a managed service could be something as trivial as doing an optimization today that takes these services from this particular line because it happens to be billing on the wrong sub-account, and all you're going to do is move it administratively, and of course you have to send a request over to the carrier also, but this is your plan. This is how you tell the carrier what you want to do, and you can say, you know what, that doesn't belong on the Bridgeville sub-account. It belongs on the 9750. We put it on there because that's where it was billing, on the baseline. But we're saying it actually belongs over on this 9570. We found out from a CSR that the physical address of that thing was not where we thought it was. And so I'm just going to use whatever the current plans are. There's a little checkbox down here that says take these current plans and on this date move them over from the sub-account that they're on over to this other sub-account. And you know what? I'm not even going to make it billable. It's just a account transfer, and I can make that description. And notice those 4 records got added, and now I have this history that I did an account transfer. It's the same account with Windstream, but now it's a different sub-account. I haven't changed the location in that particular scenario, but I have changed how the carrier is going to bill, and now I can produce a report saying, hey, we want this phone number to bill under this new sub-account. Follow that? Yeah. Well, I mean, all I'm doing is, in this case, I'm illustrating how you would clean up a bill for a client where they've got things billing in the wrong cost centers or the wrong sub-accounts with some provider.
Right.
Right. So I didn't change the plan, so obviously it's not going to bill any differently in terms of the dollar amount. It's not going to authenticate or validate when it imports usage because it's any differently because it's still the same plan. The plan is the one that defines all the pricing parameters. Now, I could have easily chosen a new plan with the same or different provider with the same or different account. You know, obviously if it's a different provider, it must be a different account. And it could then have cost savings associated to it as well. So, you know, you can do it for cleanup, for billing. You can do it for the project services, keep track of which lines are at which location. And, you know, we do things like hunt sequences. You know, we'll take POTS lines and we'll number them. We'll say hunt group A because there can be more than one hunt group. You know, and we'll do a hunt AX kind of to prime the pump here. And maybe this is number 1 in the hunt sequence, and this one happens to be number 3 in the hunt sequence. And this inventory is what, like I said, some of our clients they find extremely useful. Although since we're tracking it, I don't know why they, you know, why they care. We're looking at the number of circuits and are they over provisioned or under provisioned or whatnot. So. Any more questions for now?
None by me.
Okay. I mean, those steps, if you back up from what we did, back up, the steps are pretty simple. You create a client. That's a one-time, one thing. You create it automatically creates a location. You run a script and you import all your inventory. You know, that leg of it is done. Then you have to have a supplier and you have to have the plans. That's where the manual, the brain trust comes in to look at the bills and the CSRs and figure out what are all these plans here and which lines do they go on. And then you have to have a billing account. Again, that's trivial. You add the supplier, you put the account number, you save it, it automatically creates a sub-account. There may be a little more work if there's more than one sub-account. But, you know, it's the plans and then you start, once you get everything linked up, you import usage for every billing cycle. And again, the usage is coming from the scripts. So take that model and reproduce it for every client, for every account, and that's TAMS. And then you just need to know how to analyze it and, you know, and the reports are clicking buttons. I mean, it's really simple, but you just need to become familiar with it. And we have the documentation and the training to provide that.
Yeah, I'm just in the middle of doing it for an existing retainer client, loading this stuff in, so
yeah,
learning as I'm going.
Yeah, and you know, obviously, like I said, this is hard work because when I look at a carrier invoice, some of them are so pathetic. They don't give you any information. You know, Verizon gives you a bill that says, oh, you've got 8 lines for $437, and that's it. They don't break down, you know, on their bill. Now, you have to go in online and pull some other data, and you can drill down and find, oh, here's the list of phone numbers, but some of their bills are so high-level summary, you don't even know the phone numbers on the account. And other bills are nothing but call detail records, you know, and trying to pull out, you know. So that, to me, is the art of this. But we have created a tool set to help make it efficient and accurate and productive, you know, and organized for all your clients across all carriers. And as you know, we're building these up one line, one service at a time, but eventually you create this whole collection of these multinational corporations with, you know, now TAMS only manages North American, like U.S. and Canada phone numbers. We don't provide support for Swedish phone numbers. I can't read whatever Swedish, you know, but we support the North American dialing plan.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you all. I will end the recording here and post this on our YouTube channel.